All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We'll just get started shortly. Uh, so today we'll be discussing the vocabulary questions from the previous year papers of the MHCT exam. Uh, as students may already know, I'm just one moment checking for the comments. If there's any problems with the audio or anything like that, please let me know. Uh, as students may already know that this exam would be conducted somewhere around the month of April, if not mistaken. And we'll have ample time and we'll be covering this in multiple classes. I'll be taking a few classes, Shwetam will be taking a few classes. So today we'll cover the vocab part. Uh, those of you who have attended the prior classes will know this, that for certain set of exams, actually let me write that down. There's a certain kind of practice that I've recommended, so let me clarify this. So let's say exams like NMAT and SNAP, right? uh, this is sort of the easier variant of the earlier CAT paper, right? And these are also used to model exams like the MHCT and all the other CAT exams that we've discussed in the past. So the point really of telling students is that these kind of exams, which is the not the current CAT ones, the current CAT model is based purely on comprehension, meaning can you understand a written passage, a written paragraph, etc., a sentence. But it's not checking for vocabulary, or it's not checking for grammar. The MHCT checks for vocabulary and grammar extensively, right? So does the NMAT and SNAP, right? And so does ZAT, although ZAT is a difficult, so ZAT is not applicable in this case. So these exams actually ask vocabulary and grammar currently. And what I've recommended for students for studying for these exams is, so which is the best source to study for these exams? One moment. Which is the best source to study for these exams? And I've mentioned this before, so I'll just be really brief. The 1991 till 2008 CAT papers. Now you have to be really selective because the papers are difficult, generally speaking. But the vocabulary part and the grammar part are still applicable. In fact, some of the questions asked then are still asked in the MHCT and NMAT and other exams, right? So in a different form. So I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. So for vocabulary and grammar questions, you can actually use these previous year CAT papers. For the MHCT especially, this is most applicable of all the MBA exams. This is most applicable to the MHCT exam. The banking exam papers, the SBI, PO papers, etc., these banking exam papers, RBI grade B papers. So these papers are previous year papers. The reason why I always recommend papers is because I'll tell you how to make notes also. Usually what happens is with vocabulary and grammar, for exams, we tend to study, or at least what happens naturally is we tend to study books first, and then we'll go and try and take the exam, or then we'll go and try and solve questions. Like for grammar, most students start with Ren and Martin and then proceed to read all the grammar stuff, right? But that's not the best approach. The best approach would be for us to start with questions first, for vocabulary and for grammar. So what I want you to do is solve all of these previous year papers, previous year CAT papers, NMAT, SNAP papers, if you can find them, MHCT papers, banking papers, which you'll find like in tons, lots and lots of questions, RBI grade B papers, etc. The CLAT papers would also apply, again, only specifically for the MHCT exam. You'll see the level of questions, the level of difficulty of questions, and you'll know what I mean. So what I want you to do is, for all of these MBA exams which you may be taking or have just taken, you create a pile of previous year papers that you compile it into an Excel sheet. What I want you to do is, let's see a question. Take this first question. It's a fill in the blank question. Suppose you get this question wrong. So what I want you to do is keep a meticulous record in your Excel sheet. It should not only record the meaning of the word, all the other four words that you discover here, such as there are five words or four words here and there's none of these. All of those words you should try and record their meanings with a sentence where it's being used. Correct? If it's helpful to you, if it's a question which is, we'll try and look at one or two questions which is a typical kind of question where it's trying to confuse you. Like this is known as momentary, momentous, memorable, meritorious. So they all sort of mean positive things. They all have more or less the same syllables or they sound similar. So since this could be called a common confusable question. Since this is like the usage is a little confusable, it's called common confusable, right? So in common confusables, there's a typical, like there are about 7, 8 questions which exams ask typically. And I wanted to record those and mark like, okay, this is a common confusable question that I found in 2 or 3 or 4 papers. So by making these extensive notes, what will happen is you'll create an area where you can practice from and revise from, and you'll know which kind of questions to sort of expect, right? So this is the area where you practice from. Let me just quickly look at if there have been any comments. So no, I would say someone has asked, is it more harder than Snap or the other exams? Snap से तो comparatively काफी आसान paper होगा. What I think is most applicable, actually most applicable for all students, it sounds surprising, but the banking exam papers, which you'll really find at least like 3 papers per year, and you'll find for the past 30 years. So you'll find a lot of questions. You'll have to decide how much time you can give in the day for vocab and grammar, and in that much time solve those papers, compile, like I said, make a Excel sheet. The point of all of this is, like, coming back to our CET exam, uh, can someone tell me how many questions are asked in the CET exam total? So that's right, it's close to 200 questions are asked. What throughout these, so what you realize is it's a 2.5 hour paper. So let me clear all of this. Like I told you, make these notes from these previous year papers. I don't want to repeat this information again. So to get to this specific paper and the level of difficulty that you're going to find, it's categorically a little easier paper in terms of the questions which are asked. The 200 questions in 2.5 hours is indicative of that. This is a huge number of questions, correct? So the since someone had asked in comparison to Snap kaun sa mushkil hoga, so I think Snap is harder, NMAT is harder. What you're tested on, literally, this is like a sprint. Like let's say cat was like a 400 meters, to make the analogy, or 200-meter race. It's still hard to get a gold medal, is still hard, but this is like a 100-meter race, right? You have to go as fast as possible. So what is going to be helpful is that you know which kind of questions to solve, which kind of questions not to solve. So being good at vocabulary and grammar is a very, very important skill for MA CET exam, I would say. Now, how to be good at it, I'll show you. I expect you to solve questions first and then go to the textbook, like I said. But this is going to be more beneficial. Solving out of these 200 questions, solving these would be more beneficial than solving RCs. Right? This has a lower value in terms of, because the time it takes to go through the RC is too long. What you want to do instead is make sure that you've solved all the other verbal questions, all the easy RCs, and there are a few really long RCs. Try not to solve those. So in short, to talk about the level of difficulty of the exam compared to Snap, let's say, it's an easier paper, but we are tested on speed, right? Purely on speed, I would say. At least from the verbal point of view, you're tested purely on speed. Not so much if you look at the level of difficulty of the question. We acted on an impulse: momentary, momentous, memorable, meritorious. So fairly, like, the other questions are also previous year questions and similar level of difficulty, you'll notice. So what you're tested on is speed. For speed, you need to practice. For speed, you need to be aware of level of difficulty, right? So what is the level of difficulty of a question? Now, how do you understand the level of difficulty of a question is often asked. It's For RCs, there's a way to figure it out. For these questions, we really have to see the question and decide its level of difficulty. For RCs, you can tell the level of difficulty based on length of the sentence, difficult words, and completely new concepts. If you see these in an RC, if you see long sentences, difficult words, new concepts, you know level of difficulty is generally speaking higher. The questions might be easier, but the readability of the passage would generally speaking be higher. Okay. So you need to know the level of difficulty generally of all the entire verbal paper, which includes RCs and vocab papers. So what that means is really being able to identify level of difficulty clearly or in a way which makes sense. So suppose I know if the paper is difficult for me, I know it's going to be difficult for most other students. So I have a marker for level of difficulty because I've done certain amount of practice. So actually practice and experience is best for being really good at understanding level of difficulty. So again, solve all the banking papers. You'll get ample practice for vocab and grammar for the MHCT exam. Uh, also solve the previous year CAT papers, but I think they're a little like a few degrees harder than this paper for sure. Uh, okay. So let's start with the questions. I want to show you some questions, and hopefully along the way I'll give you a few pointers in which your ability to identify level of difficulty would improve. What you want to practice largely is speed. So if you have for vocab and grammar a set of notes that you can quickly revise, notes means previous year questions plus sense of use, right? This could be for grammar, for whatever. So these, if you can revise in say somewhere around 4 to 5 hours, if you achieve this along the way while you're preparing for these exams, it's going to be really useful for all of these sort of easier non-CAT, non-ZAT like exams. So let's start with the questions. I want all of you all to participate. The questions are fairly easy, so make sure that you're trying to answer these questions. We'll go through these questions really fast. Here's the first question. The sentences given with blanks are to be filled with appropriate words. 4 alternatives are suggested. Choose the correct alternative. We acted on a dash impulse. Yes, so around 200 questions, you can expect somewhere close to at least like 20, 22 odd vocab related questions, not just purely vocabulary questions, but vocab related questions. Like if we include antonyms, suppose all the antonyms have a little bit of logic in them, but you'll find a lot of these questions. So it's going to be of value to be good at this question type. We acted on a dash impulse. Always remember for fill in the blanks, instead of first immediately going with the blanks and being confused, this is called, like I said, this can be considered a common confusable question type question, right? So before you read this, because that always can be tricky, not as tricky here, but generally speaking it can be really tricky. So I want you to first estimate what would go here. Doesn't take long at all. It takes like like barely, I would say less than 5 seconds. We acted on a dash impulse. So I'm going to say quick, and I know it's quick. The impulse is quick because here impulse is used, so we know this is like some sudden decision, correct? Something related to some immediate thing happening, right? So short term. So since there was this context, I decided to estimate the word quick. This happens really quick, but I wanted to make sure that you consciously do this so that you don't fall into these traps. Meritorious would be invalid. Meritorious means something that is meritworthy, that should be, let's say, celebrated or rewarded. Memorable would be something that needs to be remembered, something worth remembering. Momentous would be something important. Momentary means something short-lived, right? Like the impulse is momentary. Correct. So the right answer is 1 for the first question. This is a 2021 paper, fill in the blank, by the way. So I've kept the questions in the, one moment. I've kept the questions and the years so that we know what we are solving. Let's look at the next question. All right, so do your best and we'll back you. This really should be very easy. We'll back you up, right? Back you up. We'll back you on makes no sense, back you in makes no sense, back you out. So here, back you up means we will support you. Do your best and we will support you. So this is back you up is related to have someone's back, which means you are supporting someone, protecting someone, etc. Right? So back you up is related to that. The right answer would be for back you up. Another 2021 question, another question where you can tell the level of difficulty. These questions should not take. So what you want to really work on is staying like making sure that you aren't making silly mistakes while you're speeding through these questions. These can be solved at like 10 seconds per question. I'm waiting longer because I realize that it's online and it's right. Students are trying to type in the answers or they might want to ask some other doubts. So go through the question really quick. Make sure that you're not making silly mistakes. That's the longer practice for this exam. All right, let's look at another fill in the blank question from the 2021 paper. It's not like I've chosen from two papers actually. Overall, the level of difficulty of these questions remains similar if you look at the past 10 years. So the sentences given are filled with blanks. Figure out the word that we are supposed to use. Sanjay dashes mother in the morning every day. Calls, right? So this is what we would estimate. And then we look at, we just have to pick from the right preposition or the right phrasal verb. So calls up, right? Calls in is incorrect, calls off is incorrect, calls down, incorrect, calls up, right? So really easy questions, I would say. These are questions you can't afford to get wrong. Like the only way you could get this wrong is it's a computer-based exam, it's an online exam. If you don't do enough practice, like I suggest you solve a lot of mock tests and previous year papers so that like your odds of not making silly mistakes will improve. I think that's one of the biggest criteria for scoring really high in this exam. Speed, but especially not making silly mistakes, even in keying in the sequence. All right, idioms and phrases. An axe to grind. What could it mean? An axe to grind. I have an axe to grind with someone, or I have an axe to grind about something, right? You may have heard that word or phrase. So attack aggressively is, and just a quick this for students who are wondering कि अगर if we don't know only the meaning to some word, like suppose यहाँ पे momentary, momentous, memorable, meritorious, इनका meaning ही पता नहीं होगा तो क्या करे. So in the paper you can't do anything. If anyone is teaching you any tricks, that's just you're taking on. The exam does not have any negative marking, but you're taking on an unnecessary wastage of time. So don't try and just key in some answer. If you have enough time, you can do that. What you want to do is you want to get the question wrong, like try and solve it anyways, get the question wrong and put it in that Excel sheet. You'll realize that after about 1,000 odd questions, the pool of questions from which exams create questions is quite limited. So like you'll end up in 1,000 questions, you'll end up covering 3-4 thousand words, which is a lot. Okay. So an axe to grind, if you didn't know what it means to have some specific selfish interest, some special interest. Like I said, I have an axe to grind about something. I have an axe to grind about someone, right? Or with someone. That would mean I have some selfish, specific interest that I want to discuss with someone. Attack aggressively is just a literal meaning. It doesn't make any sense. Suffer a lot doesn't make sense. Betray someone doesn't make sense. Now, when I say doesn't make sense, I am saying this with the foreknowledge of what I know an axe to grind means. If you didn't know what axe to grind means, the explanation of doesn't make sense is not a good explanation. But which is why I'm telling you to simply keep notes. There's no real explanation as to why an axe to grind became to have a selfish interest. I'm sure there is some historical English reference we can find, but it's not going to add value to our learning. All right. So let's look at the next question. Most children remain dash school between the ages of 7 and 10. These are 2021 questions. You cannot afford to get any of them wrong. Even if you're watching, you're not answering, please keep a record of what you think is the answer, because I don't want you to get any of these questions wrong. They're just too easy. Most children remain dash in school between the ages of 7 and 10. Most children remain dash school between the ages of 7 and 10. This is the only confusing one, sort of. I already, while reading it out, told you the answer if someone noticed. So you can solve these really fast, but you have to be careful. What many students think would be the right answer here is at school. I am at school, I can't come. Person X is at school, they can't come to play. So at school, we say when someone is actively at the school, right? Someone is attending school. Most children remain dash school between the ages of 7 and 10 is talking about what generally children, habitually children between 7 and 10 do in their lives at that age, right? They remain in school. At school would be incorrect here. So the right answer here would be in school, because we are saying that they were at that time attending some school. They were in some academy. They had enrolled in some academy, right? Within some academy or institute. So therefore, we are using in. If we say person X was dash school today, so it would be person X was at school today, right? Not in school today. So if it's a person who's actively in school, it would be at. If we're talking generally about people, it would be in. All right. Another area which can be tricky if you don't know the meaning. So what does fallacy mean? Here you have four words given: conformity, surety, bias, evidence. None of these. What do you think is the right answer? We are looking for a synonym. So, okay, I'll get to that question soon. What would the synonym of fallacy be? So, a synonym question is actually the sort of harder question to solve in vocab, because there's a chance we don't know the meaning of, in this case, 5 words. पांचों का meaning पता ही नहीं है. This also happens. I don't expect it to happen in the CET exam, by the way, but still, you might not know the meaning of 50% of the words or 75% of the words. That's a problem. So the synonym question is really hard. Solve them, get them wrong, keep a repository or Excel sheet and revise continuously. That's the best way to get better at them. Don't waste your time on root words or any other exercises. In terms of time taken by the exercise and the value it has, it's not a good exercise. Just solve questions and keep a repository. Uh, Conformity means to follow rules, right? To conform to rules. Surety means certainty. We know evidence what it means, and surety what it means. Bias also we know what it means. But what if we didn't know what fallacy means? Fallacy means to, in this case, fallacy would mean to literally have a problem, error, or a systemic bias, right? Some internal inherent flaw, a systemic bias or some inherent flaw, right? So bias is the right answer. Here you can, through elimination, if you know what fallacy generally means, it means a mistake or an error of some sort or some flaw in the system, which could mean, like in data systems, you can say bias, data analysis. Conformity, surety, and evidence we can eliminate. So in case someone has, actually I expect some doubts when it comes to synonym questions, in case, in terms of not the question, in terms of frustration about preparation. Because especially agar if you've done ZAT or CAT, any other exam, if you solve previous year CAT papers, there are times when you don't know all the 5 words, so you can't really solve those questions. The only way we can prepare for them is beforehand. uh, about this, children remaining in school versus at school, when I said I wanted to make an Excel sheet of notes, this is the kind of question that I would mark with an asterisk or something, to say this is commonly a preposition trap that is commonly set by exams, so be careful of this trap. You'll find this in different ways being tested. All right. Let's look at an antonym. An antonym is a easier question type. Please start with this and I'll tell you why antonyms are easier than synonyms, that is. All right. Veneration, adoration, contempt, reverence, admiration, none of these. What do you think is the right answer? Okay. Antonyms are easier because you need to, especially like most of the antonym questions, you need to find odd one out here, right? We want to look for the opposite of this word, veneration. Suppose I don't know what veneration means. Veneration means to actually revere someone, or I'll use something, to celebrate or worship someone. This is easier, right? So celebrate or worship someone. That's what it means. So we know adoration is not possible. Reverence, which is to celebrate or worship someone, not possible. Admiration, not possible. Right choice has to be contempt. Contempt would be to have hate for someone or disregard for someone, right? So veneration, antonym, contempt. Remember, in question types, agar in 200 questions you want to be really fast and make good choices about what to solve, ideally I would expect most students to solve like 195, 190 odd questions, because of simply there's no negative marking, so students are going to fill in quite a bit of garbage. uh, but if you want to be really picky and decide when to pay attention, the antonym question is to pay attention and to quickly figure out the odd one out here, even if you don't know the meaning here, right? So this is an important question type to be aware of to maximize your score in the exam. Let's look at question 8, another 2021 question of word usage. The diamond necklace was dash too extravagant for a simple dinner party. All right. Just a moment. I'll just going through this. The diamond necklace was dash too extravagant. So this is an interesting problem, correct? Uh, the problem is, the reason why I waited for slightly long is, two answers make sense here in this case, right? One answer is far too extravagant, and the other answer is none of the above. You don't necessarily need But the problem is, 5 is saying none of these. 5 is not saying no change needed. Some exams give this option of no change needed. Matlab, you don't need to make any change. That option is not presented here. So a lot of students, because of this, they've like that will give you a sentence correction question. Jisme one of the options will be no change needed. So if or NMAT will do it, SNAP will do it. So if you've taken those exams by default, many students quickly might end up marking 5 here. Remember, for your MHCT exam, none of these is an option given. No change is not an option given. So far too extravagant, right? Distance to extravagant makes no sense. Long to extravagant, very much too extravagant doesn't make any sense. Far too is the right choice. Far too, this phrase is used to suggest that something is beyond limits, right? Exceeding limits. Okay, another antonym question, an easy question. Please type in your answers. Really easy question. All right, the right answer, there's no point waiting also with this. The right answer here would be rough, is just the opposite of soft, warm, and gentle. Tender is the antonym of rough. Fairly easy. Now you're looking for the synonym of garrulous. This is a little tricky. Could be a little tricky. So garrulous, guttural, throaty. Guttural is the kind of noise or sound one can make from their gut, essentially from their stomach or throat. Guttural and throaty could be looked as distant synonyms. Uh, Concise is something that is brief, or brevity, which is another sort of fancy word for brief. But the right answer for garrulous would be talkative. Someone who talks too much. Again, synonyms are harder. If you don't know the meaning of a word, there's no real way to get out of it. Uh, so make sure you record these and in your Excel sheet. Let's look at escalate. Escalate is being asked as an antonym. So this would be a question we have to get right in the exam. All right. Escalate, really easy. No point waiting here. The right answer would be to reduce. Uh, Enlarge, raise, heighten. This is the opposite of escalate. These are sorry, synonyms of escalate. This is the only antonym. Really easy question. Uh, she got a lucrative job of a translator because she was dash in French. Word usage, which would be the most appropriate word? So the way to go about this would be, she got a lucrative job of a translator because she was dash in French. This tells us that she was good in French. Then I don't need this essentially at the start. I can estimate the meaning, and then I have to do is a simple elimination exercise. I'm simply telling you this method because the question can get harder. This is not the case. Uh, Deficient doesn't work. Efficient doesn't work. Efficient would mean the skill. Language speaking can be considered a skill, but in terms of language, efficient is not applicable here. Sufficient also is not the same as good, right? Sufficient means sort of acceptable. Sufficient would mean acceptable, right? Not a compliment. So the job is also lucrative. So the right answer would be proficient. Doesn't take this much time, but again, I want to suggest a foolproof method of solving these questions. Sometimes the questions, especially when they get hard. Three is the right answer here. Let's see the next one. I find this question tricky. I don't know about all of you all. Select the odd one out from the given options, especially because, I mean, not this question, but the question type. This is almost a GK question. I don't know, although it's asked in the verbal section or sort of with the verbal questions. I don't know if it's exactly verbal or GK. What's the answer here? Question 13. Iguana, herring, trout, piranha, mackerel. So the right answer would be iguana, which is a lizard. And these are all fish. Correct. Again, this is probably can be very easily considered a GK question, but in the 2024 paper, as you can tell, this last year, they've asked this question. Let's look at another 2024 question. The synonym of weary. Someone who's wary. Or weary would be the exact pronunciation. All right. Okay. So what would be the right answer here? If you notice, this there is if there is one change, we have gone from, again, don't expect this change to be permanent. We have gone from none of these being asked in 2021 as a standard option 5 to sort of a new option 5. Here obviously some other option is presented. Here also you have new options. So wary would be to be tired. Synonyms can again be hard. Fallible is to have bias, like is to have fallacies or mistakes or errors. So fatigued would be the right answer. Emotional, we know it applies to having too many emotions. Sentimental also sort of synonymous with emotions, but not the same as wary. So we know these would not be the answer. Capable is obviously not, is the opposite. So when I say something like obviously not, that's because we know the meaning of capable is opposite to, or at least in capacity at this moment, is opposite to vary, but you may not know it. So again, keep a record. No point thinking about what to do in case I don't know the answer. Right answer would be fatigued. uh, let's look at the next synonym of recuperate. This is easy, right? Really easy. Synonym of recuperate. All right. Discover, recapture, recover, reclaim, regain. So the right answer here is recover. Regain health could have been a distant option which students may try if especially they're in a hurry. But recuperate is actually to get well from us, to get well from a certain condition or disease. So discover obviously not. Reclaim health. This claim wouldn't work in this case. Recapture wouldn't work. But like for example, like if someone recuperates from a knee injury, that can mean they have regained uh, movement, right? So we can distantly consider recuperate to be related to regain, but obviously the right answer, the best answer, would be recover, to improve. All right. So loquacious. Loquacious. So loquacious is someone who's, again, like garrulous. You're going to find this. Actually, I just for the sake of me justifying why what I'm saying is right, and hopefully those few who watch this will actually do this, make notes. Like if you had made notes of garrulus in the 2021 paper here, if you had just taken a snapshot of what Google says garrulous meaning, you would have also found loquacious, which is talkative. Correct. So make notes. Ambiguous is to be uncertain, to be confused, not the right answer. Jealous, we know what it means. Difficult doesn't apply. Emotional doesn't apply. Verbose is the right choice for this question. Let's see the next one. All right. Bleed or blithe, blithely, right? It would be blithe. So select the synonym of blithe: grudging, cheerful, joyless, somnolent, awake. So now there are some words, like if you look at blithe and if you put meaning and you Google it, you'll get two meanings. Correct. So these are again words that are in a like words which have two meanings, frequently asked by the exams. So make a note of those. Make a record of both the meanings. So blithely could mean uncaringly, right? To blithely reply to someone, to blithely respond to someone, to not care, right? Or it could mean cheerfully. So this is usually meaning one and this is meaning two. If you just Google the meaning of blithe, you'll get two meanings, but you'll not get grudging, joyless, somnolent, awake. So the right answer would be cheerful. So if you notice, questions are really easy. What we want to maintain is some good solving method, so we don't make any silly mistakes. We don't make any errors when it comes to our own problems. So let the paper give a difficult question, and we'll see how to deal with it. But let's not make mistakes on our own. Let's look at question 18. He's so dashed that he immediately believed my story of ghosts. So this is a fill in the blank or word usage question. He's so dash that he immediately believed my story of ghosts. So he's someone who believes something really easily. Correct? So which option would you go with? So the right answer would be credulous. Credulous. Or credulous. But vociferous, blessed, credible, innocent, don't work. The right answer is credulous. Credible is something that is believable, or let's say factually acceptable. We'll generally say innocent is someone innocent could sort of work, but not the exact answer, not the apt answer. So this could have been confusing between these two terms. Credible doesn't work. Blessed obviously doesn't work because he believed story of ghosts, so this is not being blessed. Vociferous would be loud, right? Doesn't work. Right answer here is credulous. Innocent sort of works because if you translate it in Hindi, you might, or in your own vernacular, you might put a word which would be synonymous to innocent. But credulous is the right word. This means to believe things too easily, right? Like the root word is from like incredible, right? So these are all related in some way, but the apt answer would be credulous. All right. So we have seen two confusing questions so far. I think the being in school and at school, and the previous question that we saw. So far, if you notice, like, and even those would be considered easy compared to ZAT or NMAT or SNAP. So level of questions is easy, but again, like I said, we want to make sure that we are being accurate. Irony can sometimes become a mode of escape to laugh at terrors of life, is in a way to dash them. So really easy. Irony can be sometimes become a mode of escape to laugh at terrors of life is in a way to dash them. The sentence is long and it has two commas. So remember, I told you level of difficulty of a particular question in verbal can be determined by length of sentence, difficult words, and new concepts. This is a long sentence. So you have to, not really too long, but I get to talk about this. So just make a note of it. Make sure that you figure out the sentence, break it down in parts if you're too confused about the answer. For example, someone is describing or defining irony as escape to laugh at terrors of life, right? So this is to dash them. So this is not to meet them head on, right? So meet ka opposite hoga. This would be to escape them or avoid them. So avail would be meet, which is invalid. Foster would again be to sort of espouse, invalid. Approve, incorrect. Bolster, incorrect. The right answer would be evade, right? You want to escape them. So really easy if you can figure out, at least break down the sentence in parts. What they've done is the sentence sounds difficult to read because here a different author, or maybe the examiner just wanted to be difficult. A different author would put a comma here before. So irony, comma, which can sometimes become a model of escape to laugh at terrors of life, is in a way to evade them, or exists is a way to evade them, right? So you would simplify it by adding some words. What the author has done or what the examiner has done is written it from the point of view of a run-on sentence, right? Almost like a run-on sentence where some words are skipped. So run-on sentences are where certain words would be skipped, but that's because the sentence makes sense in a uh, sort of a to replicate a conversational way of expressing things. If it is the right answer here, let's see the next one. To bury the hatchet, question 20 from the 2024 paper. Again, an easy question. What could the meaning of this idiom be? Israel and Palestine are burying the hatchet, right? Based on current affairs. So keep a track of, if you don't know the meanings of certain things, keep a track of the Excel sheet. Use sentences which would make you remember what these things mean. If it's from the news, it will be slightly easier to remember. This is based on students who really want to like develop like a vocabulary for all of these MBA exams. To bury the hatchet is to end a conflict. To resolve a mystery and a friendship would be incorrect. This is actually maybe to begin a friendship. Hide, doubt one's abilities. So to bury the hatchet is to end a conflict. All right. Garish. What's the antonym of garish? Antonyms are easy. We look for the odd one out in the options, and usually that works. All right. So usually it works in antonyms. Here it's a little hard. We don't exactly get an odd one out. We know in this case, garish would mean something that is in a way vulgar, or is like too loud, or is showy, right? Someone trying to show off. So vulgar could be considered as a synonym. Beautiful does not apply as an antonym. It could be a distant antonym. Violent and scenic don't apply. So garish doesn't apply to scenes, although you can maybe rarely speak of paintings, but garish could apply to beauty standards in general. But what it applies really to taste. How is someone's taste? How how is someone's uh, or how are someone's decisions about style? Are they garish or are they tasteful? So garish is usually used about style or things like that. So tasteful is the right antonym. None of the others, beautiful or scenic, follow. Vulgar and violent we wouldn't choose anyway. All right, so A is the correct choice. Slightly confusing antonym question, but not like again NMAT, ZAT, easier questions. To cut corners, what would be to cut corners? This is really easy. We understand this colloquially also, what it means to cut corners. So to cut corners is not to break records, is to, we'll say, to find. If I say iska estimate lagao, what the meaning could be: to find a shortcut or to look for a shortcut, right? So to break the record nahi hoga, to do something diligently obviously nahi hoga, to invite trouble sort of it could be, but not the right answer. To excel is incorrect. So to find a shortcut would be to do something perfunctorily, to not truly do it with any like duty bound fashion, right? So to do something perfunctorily is to do something without a, in a lackadaisical way, without being, adhering to one's duties. Be is the right choice. A cloud on the horizon, this would mean different things culturally, but I mean, try and answer the question and I'll discuss what the answer could be. A cloud on the horizon. So unfinished tasks, sorrow in the time of joy, confusion to follow legacy. Confusion is invalid. To follow legacy makes no sense. Unfinished task also makes no sense. Sorrow or trouble on the way, these could make sense. Sorrow in the time of joy makes option B incorrect. So the right answer for cloud on the horizon, or there are clouds on the horizon, this means trouble, it's on its way. This would mean a completely culturally different thing to people in, let's say, in India, where we expect the monsoons and they determine the outlook of the, or the outcome of the country. So a lot of phrases actually have like, they're English phrases obviously, so they have this cultural outlook upon seasons which we don't necessarily agree with. uh, right answer would be trouble on the way. Make sure you record these which are confusing to you, either because of you not knowing the meaning, being culturally different from what you feel. So just keep a record of these. Vacillate, what is the antonym of vacillate? Others also, I want you to participate, students. This is, like I said, you want to learn the ability to solve these questions really fast without making any silly mistakes. uh, if you notice, this indecisive would be the synonym of vacillate, right? Amplify is incorrect, stimulate is incorrect, amaze is incorrect. Vacillate is to be someone who's indecisive, to deter, right? So consistent is the right answer here. Consistent is the antonym for vacillate. All right. So that brings us to the last question, which is question 25. This should be: like a duck in a thunderstorm. You don't simply have to try and guess. Like a duck in a thunderstorm, so we know wise to nahi hoga, peaceful to nahi hoga. One of these, right? The duck is in the thunderstorm, so sad also nahi hoga. Now, one of these. Trapped in a thunderstorm or hopeless. Correct. So this is like, you are essentially, you're not talking about someone actually being trapped. Like a duck in a thunderstorm is talking about someone's overall situation, right? So this is, if you're talking about the situation, it's not going to be trapped, it's going to be hopeless, right? In a hopeless position or situation. All right. So I want to bring the class to an end. There are a few more classes lined up. So we'll cover the MHCT exam in detail. But for today's case, just remember, I expect all of you all to go through previous year papers CAT papers, NMAT, SNAP papers, but especially bank PO papers. This is especially applicable now. I think I've sort of proved or made my case that bank PO papers are more applicable for MHCT exam than these papers per se. So solve all the possible questions and make a repository or an Excel sheet which is detailed enough that you can revise it really quickly, and that's what is going to play the role in terms of who's going to score the most in the MHCT exam, especially since you're talking about that. So remember also that speed is what you're practicing. Take a lot of take a lot of mock tests and previous year papers where you're learning to solve questions at a really fast clip and not getting them wrong. So just making sure you don't make silly mistakes. uh, Developing a good understanding of the level of difficulty of questions, like if you are really running short of time, pay some attention to the antonym question. In the synonym question, mark anything, because there is no negative marking as such. So you want to still, even not marking anything is going through some information, and you may not have time for that also. So practice a lot. Speed is going to be an important criteria. I'll see you all in the next class, and we'll discuss a few more aspects of. By the way, all the thanks for asking that where to get previous year papers. The papers that I've written, no, the SNAP and the NMAT papers are hard to find. These you need to pay for. All the other exams are official and the papers are freely available, right? So just go online and you'll find all the bank exam papers. In fact, you will find more papers than you have solving time actually. So just try and collect a pool of approx 1,000 questions, solve them, and make a record. So if you solve one question, you end up figuring out multiple words, right? At least 3 words from this, maybe. So like that. So if you have 1,000 questions, you'll have at least, let's say, 3,000 words. That's a lot. Okay. So with this, let me bring today's class to an end. I hope it's been valuable in terms of what decisions you want to take about the MHCT exam. Remember to practice speed, and I'll see you in the next class. Thank you, everyone. All right. Thank you.